My name is Candace Sanderson, and I want to welcome you. I just wrapped up a series on dreams, and now my messengers have hinted about another topic to cover. As an author, I receive emails from people who have read my books or who have followed me on social media. I have always replied to anyone who takes the time to contact me, but sometimes they ask for something that I cannot provide. As a psychologist, but let me emphasize retired psychologist, I've had requests for individual counseling, but I took down my psychologist shingle in 2018, and believe me, it is safely tucked away. I do not have any desire to go back into that field. There's several reasons for that. First, my training as a psychologist did not prepare me for the truth that I now live by. My clinical studies did not include communicating with angels and guides. It did not address energy vibrations and frequencies. I knew nothing about the world of the non-physical, yet now the non-physical is my everyday life. It was my spontaneous opening to the world of energy, the realm where our angels and guides reside, more than any of my training as a psychologist that led me to where I am today. It was my spiritual path, and that did not come from graduate school. Likewise, the information that I'm sharing is led by my heart and my messengers. So although I cannot take on any clients, what I can do is share some of my findings of how my new way of thinking has led me down a path that is more genuine and more rewarding than before I began receiving messages. The messengers have given me tools that I'll explain and show how we can use them in our everyday lives. This might be new information for you, but if not, perhaps it will show you a different way to perceive old information. I'll show you what works for me, and I'll give some practical applications of these concepts that I hope will bring that non-physical into your physical world. To have that non-physical world start to become part of your daily life in this world of the 3D. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, you can find my contact information on my website at candacesanderson.com, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment below the video. Let's start with the basics. Who are we? What are we? It's so easy to think of ourselves as our physical bodies, but let me share a brief lesson from the messengers about consciousness. And this will be the foundation that the other episodes will be based on. It took the messengers a few chapters in my first book to describe what I'm going to share over the next 2 or 3 minutes. But consciousness is awareness. But as we become aware of consciousness, which is becoming aware of awareness, we realize that consciousness becomes a tool for self-discovery, for exploration. It can even help us lead a more peaceful or spiritual life. When I first began to channel, the messengers talked about something called the point of existence. They abbreviated it as the POE, but the POE is a way to visualize consciousness. Think of consciousness as a point that resides in the body. It is so deeply embedded that many of us think that we are our physical bodies. We don't give much thought to that until one day when something happens, and that point begins to dislodge itself from us. It begins to expand. And when that happens, we realize that we can bend space and time. I used to define time as the progression of that point, our awareness, from one event to another. And as our consciousness travels from event A to event B, it does so in a logical, sequential manner. Time marches forward. But the messengers have told me that time is not linear. It's fluid. So let's discard that straight timeline. And now let's replace it with a curvy sine wave. Now, when we track our progression from event A to event B, that path gets a little more complicated. The magic occurs when we expand our awareness. Many have done this through near death experiences, but we can expand our awareness through many ways through prayer, meditation, shamanic rituals, astral projection, lucid dreaming, yoga, music, art. When that point of existence, consciousness, that awareness in our body begins to loosen and expand, it morphs from a particle state to a field of energy. It becomes a three-dimensional sphere of dynamic life force energy. So now when we superimpose that over the wavy timeline, we can see the effect that expanding awareness has on the perception of time. We can now see the past. I'm not referring to last week or last month, but lifetimes ago. And we can project our awareness into the future. And we can view the probabilities of what might occur. Using consciousness as a tool empowers us because we are no longer tethered to the 3D world where we rely on our limited 5 physical senses to perceive our surroundings. We slip into a field where everything is connected. And as we dip our toes into cosmic consciousness, we just might discover that we are consciousness. Okay, so that sums up from the messenger's point of view what consciousness is, but it might feel a little too esoteric. Let me break this down and talk about how we can actually start using consciousness as a tool. How do we grow beyond the physical? How do we get our point of existence, consciousness, to expand into a field state? You do not have to fly to Costa Rica to attend a shamanic retreat. You do not have to find that perfect meditation or prayer that sends you to places unknown. I'm here to tell you that it's not that hard to expand your consciousness. And I bet that you do it every day without realizing it. Let me explain. Once you realize that you're already doing this, you are much closer to using consciousness as a tool. Let me introduce you to someone you know very well, the observer. You know who he or she is. They are part of you that watches and comments on your performance. They are the part of you that talks to you, often giving a running commentary throughout the day. How you look, how you respond, how you behave. When I trip on a sidewalk, which is fairly often, my observer is quick to say, "You are such a klutz. I hope nobody saw you." They can be very judgmental, but good and bad. If I overeat at a buffet, I hear my observer say, "You knew better. Why did you eat so much?" When you've just finished a talk or an interview, sometimes she's great. She says, "You really did a good job there." But we all know who this is, right? We've all heard from our observer. Some are more vocal than others, but believe me, they are always around and ready to comment. An important first step in using consciousness as a tool is to become aware of your observer, to learn more about them. Is your observer supportive? Are they critical? Are they a comic? Try to get a better feel for your observer and your observer's purpose. So here's an assignment. Over the next few weeks, be on the lookout for your observer. Jot down what they say and what you're doing when your observer starts the commentary. Now that we have an idea about this sometimes nosy observer, let's pause. I want you to really think about this. This is important since it's the basis of much of the work that we'll be doing in this series. When you talk to yourself, who is the you that is talking and who is the you who is listening? I want you to see the observer for what it is, another aspect of us. The observer is not physical, it is a non physical part of you. I want you to pause and think about what I just said. The observer is not physical, it is a non physical part of us. Remember that point of existence, that visual representation of consciousness that hangs out in the body? When you notice the observer, that means your point of existence, your consciousness, your awareness just expanded outside of the body. And when we start to expand beyond the physical, the observer function automatically materializes. So when you recognize that observer aspect, know that your awareness has just moved beyond the physical. You know, it is so natural the way the observer slips into our lives that we often don't even realize that that is the first step for many of us in expanding consciousness. We are moving from that tiny particle, that point of existence that's in the body, to a field state that expands beyond the body. It's that point of existence no longer hiding, but morphing into this beautiful field of energy where everything is connected. And once we become the observer, the one that's aware of awareness, aware of us in our physical body, congratulations, drum roll. You've just taken your first step in using consciousness as a tool. As the observer, you've just stepped outside the physical body. From there, you can learn to connect to divine guidance. You can learn to have an out of body experience. You can learn to lucid dream and so much more. But once the observer steps outside and you recognize that beautiful aspect of yourself, that non physical aspect, you can then intentionally move more of your awareness into that observer function. And from there, you can have fabulous experiences. In The Reluctant Messenger, in a chapter called Good Vibrations, the messengers introduce the point of existence that I talked about, that visual representation of consciousness. I want to read a couple messages, and for those who are new to my work, when I receive messages, they usually come to me in dictation form. I, air quotes, hear when to start a new paragraph, what punctuation to use, how to pronounce unfamiliar words. If I make a mistake, I, air quotes again, here, strike that, followed by the correct wording. The chapter after Good Vibrations is Father Time, and I'm going to read a couple paragraphs from that. Many humans think of themselves as their physical bodies, separate from others. Their self-awareness begins from a small point in the center of their physical bodies. We refer to this as the point of existence, POE. From an aerial view, when several humans interact, their POEs resemble scurrying insects or moving dots. Most humans do not realize that POEs exist within a field of energy, capable of expanding and overlapping with other energy fields. So in these messages, we learn a couple things. The point of existence, that point that represents consciousness, is something that for most of us stays deeply embedded in our bodies. And because it's so neatly tucked away, it's understandable that many of us think that we are our physical bodies. I know I did for many, many years. I am this physical body. Nope. And this last paragraph says so much, that consciousness is not an isolated particle state. Consciousness is a field of energy that connects us to all other energy fields. I didn't fully understand these important concepts in real time, but that's been the basis behind learning about consciousness and using it as a tool. Later in the chapter, the messengers add the concept of time and the relationship between expanding awareness and altering our perception of time. I'll go into that later, but I just want to look at a couple sentences. Let us now add the concept of time. There is an energy field surrounding each POE, point of existence, and it exists outside of what humans refer to as present time. So this is the beginning of messages that describe how time shifts and how we learn to manipulate time when we superimpose a field of energy over that curvy timeline. Our perception of time changes. We're no longer stuck in the now, but we can perceive the past and the future. Now, this is very different from living in the past or living in the future that many of us do, always thinking of what happened or what might happen. We can learn to shift time, to bend time and space, but we actually do that from the present moment. By expanding our consciousness into the present moment, we can shift our awareness into the past or the future. Isn't that what psychics do? Gifted mediums, people who can access past lives, maybe through the Akashic records. What the messengers are telling us and teaching me at this point in the book is that the things that psychics do, for example, isn't necessarily magical thinking or it's woo-woo. It's just a matter of expanding your awareness and connecting energy vibrations. As I learned to view the world through the lens of energy, I realized this became very, very logical. This is a good place to stop. And I've given you some thoughts for you to consider, especially think about that sometimes constant companion, your observer. There's a couple things I'd like for you to do. Remember your assignment. An important first step to become aware of the observer. So write it down in the next few weeks, what you're doing, what the observer says. Another thing is if you have a meditative practice, whether it's listening to a meditation or whether you're just going into silence, I suggest adding a mantra. This mantra that I'm going to share is the first sentence in many of the affirmations at Monroe Institute. And over time, I've realized how profound this one statement is. But think of adding this: I am more than my physical body. I want to thank you for joining me today. Feel free to contact me, like, subscribe. I'm always looking for positive reviews on my books on Amazon. So thanking you in advance for that. And until next time, remember, be kind, and remember this: you are more than your physical body. Goodbye.